Okay. We'll start here in the corner. This is a scalpel kit that was made in 1853. It was imported from Germany. A lot of times they would get instruments from Europe and then they would replicate them here to use, in the surgery and stuff like that. This is a medical kit that a surgeon would carry. This was actually for venereal disease. But he would carry this as well. These are syringes, and they were actually made by Goodyear. Yeah, I mean, that's hard to believe. They would use these to flush out the wound. They would use the smaller syringe for pain medication. They had opium, they had morphine, is what they would use. They were using the larger ones for the pain medication, but they would come back the next day and the patient may have died. So they kind of figured out that that was too much to use. A lot of times they would also just take the medicine and put it directly into the wound, thinking that that would get into their system. So they didn't use syringes a lot, give shots a lot, because they just didn't know a lot about it. They didn't know what they were doing. This little section here is what it, and you may have heard the term bloodletting. That's where they would make an incision with this is called a phlegm, and they would take that and make an incision, and then they would take the cupping jar, they would take a candle and heat around the jar, place it over the incision, and let the blood drain out. The downside of that was they didn't know how much blood was in the human body. So a lot of times they would bloodlet, and it was like, then the person may get sick, and they're like, now what do we do? Because they didn't know.
Good to see you again. 2 years ago.
This here is stuff that would have been issued by the Sanitation Commission. And the Sanitation Commission was established during the Civil War. See, before the Civil War started, they didn't have anything in place for hospitals. They didn't have transport, getting soldiers off. What do they do with them? When they take them off. They came up with a system of they called it a bandage line, but it's what we know now as triage. They would take the wounded soldier to the bandage line, determine whether or not they could patch them up, go back out to battle, or if they would transport them to the field hospital. And the field hospital would be anywhere from 3 to 5 miles back from the battle site. So, and they would take all the prisoners there. Now this kit,
May I take your picture?
yeah, he's in charge. This kit here is for, this is considered a surgeon's amputation kit. They would put stuff in boxes. You see how this is inlaid into the box. One being is when they transported them, they wanted to keep them safe and not get them damaged and then not lost as well, because a lot of this stuff was just so extremely hard to come by. So these are some of the instruments that he would use during amputation and stuff. Now these are actually, this is called a trephine, and they would use this to go into the skull, which is very hard. They would take this, you see that point right there, that would go in the bone. They would turn and pull that out. That would relieve pressure off the brain if they had a head injury. This is a skull saw. You can tell by the way it's curved there, so that if they had to saw, that way. These are for smaller, this is of course like a leg, just an arm. Then you get up into the smaller ones. This might be for somewhere in the wrist. This could be fingers. This could be small bones. In your wrist you have 20 different bones all in here. So they would use this on the smaller bone. They would use These are chisels. Anytime that when you saw anything, it's not going to be smooth. You know, it's going to have ridges, maybe some shards on it or something. They would actually take one of these chisels and they would smooth that bone out so that when they sewed it up, there would not be anything that would be, you know, sticking to the skin and stuff.
Do you have any idea what this is?
Yes, this.
I'm afraid to ask.
I know. What they would use this for is when the patient would come in, the doctor would determine like where he would amputate. He would go further down below that. He would take this is a scalpel. It's called a cable. They would cut below where he's going to cut the bone. They would attach these to the muscle and pull all the muscle from the bone to keep cutting. They wanted to cut bone only. They didn't want to cut the muscle, tendons, ligaments, stuff like that. Then they would tie those off and everything so that the person would still have use of that limb. If they didn't do that, it would just be a dead limb, you know. So they would take time in trying to make that where he could use that limb after the fact.
Yes, ma'am.